Okay. Randy.
Carl, I hate to see it come all the way over here and not be asked a question or given an opportunity to express yourself. One of the things we're working on here is to prioritize levy investments in the Delta and come up with a Delta levy plan. Given the scope of the restoration that's under consideration by BDCP, and given the reality that most of the levees in the Delta require improvements over time, one would think that there are probably some islands out there that are targeted for restoration sometime in the future that levee improvements now probably wouldn't result in any benefits. Can you help us understand, given the scope of the restoration that is under consideration, are there things that we should be considering in terms of a levy prioritization plan, and areas that should be improved and areas that are probably going to be sacrificed or converted that may not warrant much investment by the state?
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. Thank you, Councilman Fiorina. I think, in both the BDCP's conservation strategy and the ecosystem restoration program's conservation strategy, we've identified areas primarily at the periphery of the Delta as the focuses of restoration, because that's where the elevations are most appropriate. And consequently, those are areas that maybe are less flood prone, or particularly from forces within that you would find deeper in the Delta, tidal effects, flood flows, wind wave action, and that kind of thing. So I think the focus has been in these peripheral areas and not so much on the interior Delta, where things are so subsided that it's going to take some fairly extraordinary efforts to raise those elevations. This is something that, I think the work that DWR and USGS are doing with subsidence reversal and wetland creation, managed wetland creation to raise the elevations may be promising, and that we may focus on some of those. I think some of the opportunity lies on islands that are already owned by the state, primarily Twitchell and Sherman Island, because those, I think, as we've seen from PPIC reports and the thinking of Dr. Moyle and others, that those are important places to allow for future, if we can, get them up to the appropriate elevations for the future movement of the low salinity zone, and just because of climate change and sea level rise, no matter what happens. So I think those are opportunities. They haven't been specifically called out and will require a lot of planning as they move forward. I think this is where the reusable tunnel material provides an opportunity. I think there's concern about it just piling up. That material is very useful in implementing restoration actions to create the appropriate elevations at places that are subsided and wouldn't currently be good. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that material to be reused in levee improvements. There's a lot of concern about Staten Island. I think, Staten Island's levees need a lot of work, and having that material there to help improve those would help with the sustainability of that island. And I think a lot of the material that is going to be stored there will be stored there for a fairly short period of time and probably moved to other locations to do levee improvements or habitat improvements. So I would say that right now, again, the focus is on these more peripheral areas, places like Cashlu, where, I don't know that the issues are, from a flood perspective, are the same that they would be on, Bacon Island or McDonald Tract or something like that. So I think one of the things we will need to explore is, how we would manage an island that might be breached in the future, and the hard decisions need to be made about whether to reclaim it and put it back in or try to manage it so that it can be useful habitat.
If I might supplement a couple of Carl's thoughts too.
Turn your mic on, please, Dan.
I think partly one of the things that we can do, as Carla pointed out, is use the restoration strategy of the BDCP as a framework to identify areas where a single investment in restoration might help us offset an otherwise needed investment in levee priorities. I think the thing that helps us understand is the ways in which the water quality that the BDCP depends on, in terms of the water that's diverted, depends on other elements of the levee system, and so that will help us highlight areas that need protection. Finally, I think we can look to some of the strategies that Carl's colleagues in San Francisco Bay have developed for broad, low, wildlife-friendly levees. In the Bay Area, they call them horizontal levees that provide for just wave attenuation. They might occasionally be overtopped, but they're perhaps more compatible with the habitat restoration kinds of needs. And I think that will be another thing we'll be able to understand better as the BDCP's restoration strategy becomes clearer.
I think, to kind of build on that, there are components of BDCP, particularly the channel margin, habitat restoration, the floodplain. Those, in all likelihood, and definitely need to be planned in the context of levee improvements and flood control. And I think for the most part, their ability to move forward will be the ability to tie them into flood protection moving forward as part of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. So I think there's the need for close coordination and integration of those plans as future planning goes forward relative to flood control in the Delta or flood management in the Delta.